All right, Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai Bahasham Racha HaKwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth and rule well. Peace and blessings unto the hopeful elect, pushing his word throughout the four corners of the earth in truth, righteousness, and sincerity. To USA Shalom. This is the brother Yeshaya coming at you again through spirit and power of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. Back again with another lesson. This one's going to be entitled A Thousand Years of History They Try to Whitewash and Erase. Okay. And of course, we're talking about the Dark Ages here, a time period where Esau deemed to be an age of darkness, an age of decline of intellect, a decline of scientific advancements, right? And but really, when you tap into the truth of the matter, you'll see that the reason why they called it that was because Jake was ruling, right? And Esau, he was in a state of intellect decline, intellectually, or a decline intellectually, I should say, right? He was pushed, into the caves where he would become a caveman, right? That's spoken about in the book of Job, right? Chapter 30, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, going into how, they lived in the caves, they braid, like the animals, pretty much doing all that ooga booga, what I'm saying, and eating raw meat. And, the only way they were able to survive is by eating the juniper roots, right? That was the only way they were able to sustain themselves and actually uh, um, pretty much able to um, continue, carrying on their legacy, I should say. But nevertheless, we're gonna go ahead and touch into this real quick. I want to start off first with Revelation 20 and verse 1. It says, "And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand." It says, "And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years." Right. So this dragon, is really going into the Roman Empire, right, into Esau's empire. Okay. And like it says, this old serpent, you know, which is the devil, because that's what Esau is, the devil that the Bible speaks of, which when you go into that word devil, it just means deceiver, right? False accuser, you know. And it says, and Satan, right, because he comes in the name of Satan, he comes doing the bidding of Satan. It says, and bound him 1,000 years. So for a period of 1,000 years after the Roman Empire fell, Jake will come into power, and this devil, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, would be, restrained. There'll be like a point in time where he'll be limited on what he will be able to do. Pretty much, he'll be stripped uh, um, out of the power that he once had when he was in that ruling seat of the Roman Empire, and he'll be um, lacking of influence, lacking of power, lacking of intellect, right? Because that's why they call it the Dark Ages. It was a time period when Esau, he was on the bottom. He was at the bottom of the totem pole. He was pretty much deemed pretty much the wild man. You know what I'm saying? Uh, uh, just living out in the woods. Half naked or naked. All hairy as hell. You know that's his legacy. You know, during this time period, right? Something that they're ashamed of, right? But even then, they're also proud of it. They understand that's the reason why you hear about, the Flintstones and cavemen, and they always push that narrative, that man started with the caveman. That's pretty much how men were in what they call prehistoric times. But no, right? People actually were civilized. The Most High gave man intellect, gave man, the ability to think and actually create and have a civilized, way of life. But really, that whole concept of caveman came from Esau, right? But anyway, let me continue reading a little bit more. Verse 3, it says, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up. Right? That bottomless pit is going into Europe, right? Because really, when you go into it, Europe pretty much has no real natural resources. This is the reason why everything that they get has to be imported, right? And really, the 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 amount of resources that it needs to continue to to receive, to upkeep, is endless. They continuously have to import stuff because, like I said, they don't have no resources of their own, right? But it says, and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more, right? Because as the Romans, they were, pushing their own narratives, you know what I'm saying? Whatever it was that they were pushing at the time, you know what I'm saying? All these different ideologies, philosophies, right? But it says, to the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loose a little season. So for 1,000 year period, what they would deem as the Dark Ages, you know, he would lose power, right? The Roman Empire will fall, you know. But it says that, and after that, he must be loose a little season. So after that, that 1,000 year period is what you'll call the dark. I mean the Salakia, the Renaissance period, right? And I want to get into this real quick, right? Because I typed this in on Google. It says Dark Ages was a time of black rulers, right? But it says, while some alternative historical narratives and online claims that the Dark Ages, roughly 500 to 1000 CE, were a time of widespread black rule in Europe, Mainstream Academy does not support this as a general rule, but instead highlights specific instances of African influence. Excuse me. It says the Moors, who were people of African descent, did rule parts of Spain and Portugal for nearly 700 years, starting in the 8th century, and were and and there are records of individual black figures in European high-ranking positions through the medieval period. See, but this is where they give you truth mixed with lies. Yes, the Moors did rule, right, and there were high prominent so-called black figures in European status, but they don't understand that most of the kings that were there were so-called black men, right? And really, the Byzantine Empire, I have this also on deck, right? So I typed in here how long. As a matter of fact, there it is. This is how long. I typed in how long did the Byzantine Empire last, and the Byzantine Empire, for those who don't know, was ruled by Jake, so-called black men, right? It says the Byzantine Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire, lasted. It's also called the Holy Roman Empire, but it says lasted for over 1,100 years, from roughly 330 AD, right from the fall of Rome, to 1453 AD. Now, certain historians they debate on when the Roman Empire fell, but really you can date it at this time because it says right here key dates of survival. It says start 330 AD. Emperor Constantine the First dedicates New Rome, Constantinople. Right. That's whenever the Roman Empire, it being an actual empire, would fall, and this new Rome, or the Holy Roman Empire, will come into play. But it says the end of it was May 29th, 1453. Constantinople falls to the Ottoman Turks, right? So again, a period of roughly about 1,100 years or 1,000 years, right? And that correlates well with what we read here, right? Revelation 20 and 2, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, right? So for 1,000 years, Jake will be ruling, right? And Esau will be at the bottom. But let me see. Let's get this. The fall of Rome, the Roman Empire. This is the fall of the Western Roman Empire occurred on September 4th, 476 CE. So see, that's where they uh, they go through these different timelines, right? But really, you can even go earlier than that because um, Jake was ruling. You know, starting with I believe it was Nerva. Nerva was the first so-called black ruler of Rome. You had uh, Marcus Aurelius, right? You had Trajan. You had various different um, so-called black rulers that were emperors in Rome, right nearing the end of its rule, right? But it says the fall of the Western Roman Empire occurred on September 4th, 476 CE, when the Germanic chieftain uh, Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor Romulus Augustulus. This marked the end of over 500 years of Roman imperial rule in Western Europe, signaling the transition into the Middle Ages. Which that wasn't the case. Like I said, like Jake was ruling at the last days of the Roman Empire, right? Which eventually transitioned into, like I said, the Byzantine Empire or the Holy Roman Empire, right? And then after those 1,000 years were completed, you had what you'll call the Renaissance, right? And this is the Renaissance from 1400s to the 1600s was a European art period making a rebirth of the classical Greek and Roman ideals. See, so this is that revival, right? This is that, as it says right here. Verse 3, it says in Revelation 20:3, it says, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loose a little season, right? And that's also in Revelation 13. Let me get that real quick. So it says in Revelation 13, I'm just going to get to the point. In verse 3, going into that fourth beast, right? Going into the Roman Empire, right? It says, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, right? So that deadly wound, it falling, the fall of the Roman Empire, was that deadly wound, but it was healed, right? And how was it healed? It was through the revival of it through the Renaissance period, right? All the classics, the Greekish and Roman fashion coming back, right? The culture, right? The whole democracy and all that, right? It says, and all the world wandered after the beast. See? So let's go back and read this. So it says the Renaissance was a European art period making a rebirth of the classical Greek and Roman ideals, shifting from medieval abstraction to realism, humanism, right, which is just a form of being like atheistic, what I'm saying, pretty much defying um, the Oriental ways, the Eastern ways, them pretty much going against God. But it says, in naturalism, with a focus on human anatomy, emotion, and the natural world, right? So it says key characteristics include linear perspective, uh, chiaroscuro, light and shadow, and balanced compositions. Okay, just going into some random shit. But it says key characteristics: realism, naturalism, perspective, humanism. Okay, let me see. Let me see what else it says. But that was pretty much it on this, you know. Right? But the point being is that started around the 1400s, right? And when you look at what we said earlier, The Byzantine Empire lasted from 330 AD to 1453 AD. So at the latter end of the 1400s is whenever Esau started to come up, right? Started coming up in power in Europe, right? Start with Ottoman Turks, also as Spanish, right? Um, what were their names? I can't forget their names. I mean, I'm forgetting the names. Um, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, right? Um, they fought against the Moors. You know what I'm saying? And you have the last Moorish king. What's his name? Muhammad the 11th or 12th. I can't remember. They call him as Chico. As a matter of fact, let me look it up real quick. Last Moorish king. Yeah, Muhammad the 12th, known as Boabdil, right? They also called him El Chico. I don't think it says it. Yeah, see, Boabdil Ab, Abdallah Muhammad the 12th, known as El Chico the Little, right? Was the last Moorish ruler of the Nasrid dynasty in Granada, Spain. He surrendered the city to Ferdinand and Isabella on January 2nd, 1492, ending 700 years of Muslim rule in the region, right? And that was Jake, over there in Spain ruling, right? But that was the end. But all this to say, is how during this time period, Esau later on, would start to whitewash the images, start to erase those kings, that were so-called black, and they'll chip off the noses and erase all this history. There was so much history that they couldn't really erase everything, but they made a significant change and dent in history or change in history to where the narrative for so long would be painted as if he was in rulership at this time, right? But now that the Most High is pretty much revealing the truth, now it's coming to show that Jake was in rulership. Those who Esau deemed as being insignificant, being nothing but slaves, being savages, being uneducated, uncivilized. We were the ones in power, and he was the one as a savage, that brute beast. That damn caveman in the woods, looked down upon. Deemed a criminal. A savage. You know what I'm saying? Who needed to be civilized, right? So now he tried to flip that narrative as if we, were the ones that were uncivilized, but really it was the opposite way, right? So I'm gonna get this real quick. Let's get Job 9:24. It says, "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked," right? So the earth, right, power over the earth, rulership has been transitioned over onto the so-called white man, right? It says, "He covereth the faces of the judges thereof, if not where and who is he?" Right? So what he did throughout the time period of him coming up during the Renaissance period, you will have a time period where he will call what was called iconoclasm, right? Where he would uh, deface the images, chip off the noses, like I said, paint over the images as them being white, and pretty much do all this, editing to history to fit his narrative, to fit as if they were always in power, as if they were the holy people, right? And who else did this but the so-called white man? So this also ties in onto who the devil is, who the wicked of the Bible are, right? The wicked, because Jake can be wicked, but this is talking about a particular uh, uh, group of people, right? As it says, the earth is given to the hand of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So if it ain't him, then who else could it be? Right? It's pretty much the question that it's posing. You see? So all these are clues. Like that's what the apostles always say. You know, you got to understand the history, or how do they say it? Salakia. To understand the mystery, you got to understand the history, something like that, right? But you got to tap into history to get those clues, to get those pieces of the puzzle to the understanding of who this man is, right? And really, to get a better grasp of the Bible, because the Bible isn't just a religious book; it's also a historical book. It's history. It's truth to this, man. Right? Now let's get this. Let's get Daniel 4:17. It says, "This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men." So as we read in Job 9:24, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. So the Most High gave this man his time to rule, right? Esau didn't get it off his own volition. He didn't get it off his own strength, his own power. No, the Most High allowed him to come up in the ranks. He allowed him to come up into power, right? I have another one. It's in Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 11. It says, "I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor to nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all." You see? So I'm reading this in the NLT real quick. It says, "I have observed something else under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race, and the strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wise sometimes go hungry, and the skillful are not necessarily wealthy. And those who are educated do not always lead successful lives. It is all decided by chance, by being in the right place at the right time." And that's what Esau prized himself as, being a opportunist, right? But the Most High gave him that spirit, right? The Most High set him up in the right place at the right time to do what was needed to fulfill His will, right? And the Most High's will was to punish the Israelites, right? And to give him the seat of power for a period of time for our punishment. But all that is all coming to an end now, man, right? His time period of ruling is right now, from the point of us raising up and coming to the understanding of who this man is, um, and who we are, right, as a people, right, and seeing the downfall of his system, is pointing to that this man's time of rulership is at its end, right? All things come to an end, right, as they say. Um, let's get this. Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 1. It says, "To everything there is a season and a time of purpose under the heaven." See, so to everything there's a season, right? And this just happens to be Esau season, right? But we're going to have our season soon, right? What you'll call an era, right? Let me see. I want to get verse 17 or 16. 17. Ecclesiastes 3:17. It says, "I said in my heart, the Most High shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time, uh, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work." Right. So there's a time for for every purpose and for every work, right? So the Most High used Esau to fulfill his purpose, right, on the planet Earth, right? And but now he's raising us up to fulfill again his purpose on the earth, which is to, you know, chant down Babylon, right? Which is to magnify the name of the Most High on the planet Earth and return the elect back, you know, to the Most High, which would which will usher in the return of our Lord Yahushua, right, and the fall of this man's kingdom. Now let me see. Let's get Second Ezra's 4:37, and it says, "By measure hath he measured the times, and by number hath he numbered the times, and he doth not move nor stir them until the said measure be fulfilled." Excuse me. I'm gonna read it back. It says, by measure hath he measured the times, and by number hath he numbered the times. He doth not move nor stir them till the said measure be fulfilled. So the Most High has allotted um, particular prophecies to happen at particular times, right? They have his own set, you know what I'm saying, time and place where it will take, where it will, when and where it will happen, right? And when you look at history, we're seeing, you know, how, especially with this, you know, is a clear example, right, of Esau falling during the Roman Empire, and then and then Jake coming up, you know, into power and ruling for that period of 1,000 years, and then Jake falling, and then Esau coming up in the ranks, right, and, you know, reestablishing that Roman empire back, that dragon whose deadly wound was healed, right? I mean, look around you right now. Not Jake, but Esau. You know, he has democracy up and running, right? He got the Senate, right? That voting system, right? The two horns like a lamb, right? As it says, you know, the two-party system. You know, he has, the infrastructure. Look at the infrastructure. The Capitol building, you know, is all based off that Roman, Greekish fashion, right? Ain't nothing new under the sun. You know, he still uses the eagle, right? The Romans used the eagle. I believe the Greeks used the eagle, if I'm not mistaken. Um, you have what else? Um, just the culture, the arts, right? Romance, as they call it, romance, right? Because it has a Rome in it. Um, really, a lot of the ideals and philosophies, the whole thing with debating, you know, all that was popular in the Greekish and Roman culture. You know, all these things that we're seeing nowadays, this was all done before, right? The bread and circuses, right? All done before, all done during the first time the dragon was allowed to rule, right? But anyway, um, let's see, let's get this. Isaiah 34:16. Isaiah 34 and verse 16, and it says, "Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read, no one of these shall fail, none shall want her mate." You see, so none of these prophecies are gonna fail, right? That's why I said if you go back into history, you can see, you know, the prophecies plainly. So should give you reassurance of the future prophecies that we're seeing that's about to happen. That should give you more reassurance that the Most High is not a man that he should lie. The Most High's word, you know, is gonna come to pass, right? He gave us the signs to look out for, and this is the reason why we're confident that we are living in the last days. The fact that we got this truth, the breakdowns, we're seeing the signs. Like the scriptures talk about how no sign shall be given unto him but a sign of the prophet Jonas, right? So the fact that the prophets are out here, that should be a clear sign, an evident sign that we're living in the end times, right? But the Most High also gave us different tokens, you know, to look out for as far as prophecy to point to the end days, right? The end of Esau's system, right? The end of the Roman Empire 2.0, right? And we're seeing them right now. And then when you look back and look at, you know, the prophecies of back then, you know, even this prophecy that we're talking about now that happened already, of the dragon rising up again, a deadly wound that was healed, you know, this is just further, um, it should give you further reinforcement in your faith in Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, right? But let me see, let me finish this out. It says, seek ye out the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail, none shall want her mate. So none of it is going to fail, man. None of these prophecies are going to fail. The mark of the beast, right? Jacob's trouble, World War III, right? All these different plagues and pestilences is going to befall the earth. A time like no other, right? These things are going to come to pass. This is why we're constantly warning and constantly trying to get our people to repent and turn back to the Lord, because the time is being cut short, right? The times are speeding up, right? The things that we read about in scriptures is happening right now, and they're not letting up, right? But it says, none shall want her mate, right? Meaning you can't compare this to no other book. There's the what they call the what's that book called? The Islam's use. I forgot the damn name. The Quran, right? The Quran doesn't have no answers, right? The Talmud has no answers. Whatever books the Buddhists use that has no answers. Goddamn, Nostradamus has no answers. You know what I'm saying? The only answers that you're gonna get pertaining to true prophecy, right? Not no false prophecy, but true prophecy is from the scriptures, right? And from the men that the Most High set up, right? Which is over here in Great Millstone, starting from our apostles and elders on down, right? These are the men you gotta be listening to when it comes to prophetic news, when it comes to what to do in these last days and prepare for salvation, right? But it says, and this all comes down from Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua through the Holy Spirit, right? That's supping with these men, right? But it says, for my mouth it had commanded them, and his spirit it hath gathered them. You see? So let me get another one. And I'll close it off with this. This is Isaiah 14 and 27. It says, I'm actually going to start up at 25. It says that I will break. Actually, let me see. I'll start at verse 24. It says, the Lord of hosts has sworn, saying, surely as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand, that I will break the Assyrian in my land, and upon my mountains tread him underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them, and his burden depart from off their shoulders. So who's the modern day Assyrian? Right, Esau, Edom, right? But it says verse 26, this is the purpose that is purpose under the purpose upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon all the nations. For the Lord hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back? Right. So all these prophecies that we're seeing come to pass, it all happened, right? Prophecy took hold on us, the Israelites, and prophecy took hold on Esau. Prophecy took hold on all these nations, right? No one can decide and change what the will of the Lord is, right? If the Most High wants a nation to go down, it's going to go down. If the Most High wants one nation to come up, it's going to come up, right? In this case, we're on the come up, the Israelites, and Esau's on that decline, right? And there's nothing he can do about it. He can't extend his time period, no matter what he does. You know, the Most High has already set the time limit for his fall, right? The time limit that he has to reign on the planet Earth. right? This is a scripture. How does it go? Set bounds, right? Bounds that he cannot pass. Right here, Job 14:5. It says, seeing his days are determined. You see, his days are determined, right? It's already written how long his kingdom is going to last, how long he's going to be able to rule, right? It says, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass, right? See, so Esau has a bound, right? His era of rulership is coming to an end, and he knows it. This is the reason why Revelation 12:12 says what it says, you know? As a matter of fact, let's go ahead and read that real quick. And I'll close it off with that. Revelation 12:12. It says, therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. You see, so the Most High has revealed certain things unto this man. You know, Esau has advanced so much, technologically, and through his, witchcraft, that he is able to tap into, the spirit world and tap into, these demons that are giving him, different answers and responses and giving him insight, as far as the future. But he understands that, his time is coming short, and he's taking necessary measures to try to prevent the inevitable. But you know, like we've mentioned, what the Most High has a purpose, no one can disannul it. Pretty much, no one is able to cancel it. No one is able to, stop it. The Most High says something, and it's gonna happen. And we know this man is coming to an end, right? But anyway, that was pretty much it. That was all I had on that. I pray this lesson was edifying. I'm gonna go ahead and close it out by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Racha HaKodash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who taught me this truth and rule well. Peace and blessings unto the hopeful elect, pushing his word throughout the four corners of the earth in truth, righteousness, and sincerity. Until the next time, I'm gonna say Shalom, Kwame Shalom.